Hey everyone, and welcome to the You vs. Mind podcast. My name is Jack Leake, and I am super excited that out of all the podcasts you had to choose from, you chose this one, and you won't regret it. Here on You vs. Mind, we dive into the heart of the mental battle and provide you with effective strategies to fight, face-to-face, the things like stress and anxiety that plague us all, as well as looking into the root of the issue and digging up testimonies and stories from people and their bout with these trials. It is time to escape the lies we tell ourselves and take back what is ours. And my job is to make sure you don't do it alone. Are you ready? I forgot how fun fidget spinners were. I remember when we were both in high school and they became popular. That was like our sophomore or junior year.
Yeah,
and everyone was walking around the hallways with one or two fidget spinners in their hands, flipping them around. And I was one of them, but I was just doing it because of the trend. Now, I found this one in my room about 2 weeks ago.
Why, I don't know.
Why did I ever put this thing down?
I'm questioning if you should.
It's great.
I feel like it's the third wheel of our relationship. Like everywhere we go, it somehow manages to follow. I don't know how that happens, but
no, it's great. Like I'm a leg shaker. I shake my legs all the time when I'm sitting down. And this fidget spinner it gives my mind something to do. I think better whenever I'm flipping this thing around. I process stress better. Like I kind of just put it all into this spinner. Like it's a good
that poor spinner's
invention.
taken a lot.
Anyways, so if you all saw in the title, we're going to be discussing mental investments. You might think, man, what does that mean? Is this a business podcast? I thought this was a psychology thing. What mental investments means, at least in our conversation today, is essentially the things that we commit ourselves to, such as like what we invest our thoughts into, what we invest our time into, and what we invest, how much time we think about it. So, for example, I'm a big Kansas basketball fan, and that's a whole nother story, but this season I really invested a lot of my time, a lot of my efforts into following this Kansas basketball team that ended up winning it all, by the way. But Isabel, if you want to explain the direction we want to take it, I'll bring you in here.
Yeah, no, I think you said exactly kind of where I've been thinking about it over the past week as well, is it's just like throughout the day, throughout the week, we all devote ourselves to different things, whether that's school, work, friends, relationships, etc. Anything like that requires our time and effort. And so basically what we kind of wanted to talk about today was just, what does that look like as far as putting in time and effort to different things, and how does that, end up going into how our mind processes things, what we're worried about, what we're concerned about, and just the ways that mental investments either help or hinder us in kind of our mental state of mind and health.
Yes, because how often, that was well said, do you step back because you get neck deep into these mental investments? Yeah. Some examples that I know you and I have been through, like we love Adidas Ultra Boost, the shoes.
Yes.
And so we I think I want to buy this pair. I got dirt on this pair. I'm stressing out. I can't believe it. And we're just so deep into these things, these earthly things. And I'm still involved in cryptocurrency, but there was like a month span where all I looked at was, is this coin going up?
You checked it all the time.
I was so mentally invested in these different things. Anyways, and so the idea of this podcast is to make you aware of, we need to take a step back and look at what we are mentally invested in. And is it worth not only investing ourselves in, that's a question too to ask yourself, but is it worth worrying about? And oftentimes the answer is no. Now sometimes maybe the answer is yes, and we're going to get into an article here in a moment that'll help shape this conversation. But Isabel, we really need to take a step back and look at, is what I'm mentally invested in worthy of my thoughts and all my time and effort?
Yeah, because I think a lot of times not all mental investments are bad, or not all the things that we're involved in, are out to harm us. But I think sometimes, you're exactly right. You get neck deep into situations, or you get really involved in stuff and you don't realize how much of it's taking your time and how much of that is going into, you're processing all that stuff. And so whenever you think about, oh, how am I spending my time, you know, is that like something for me, like school? I always go back to school on stuff, but for school, like it was like, okay, like I got to the point where I was like, I need to take a step back but that's where it's like, okay, I got to the point where I was so consumed with it that I was starting to, stress about it, not sleep, different things. And that's not good for me on the physical side of things as far as health and all that. But it was a lot of anxiety. And so to be able to go, okay, I need to take a step back. I need to realize school's important, but it's not everything. And I've been able to kind of pump the brakes a little bit. I still time manage well. I still, get my assignments done on time. I do the best work that I can. But I know that if I miss, a point on an assignment here or not do as well on a test, it's not the end of the world and I'm going to be fine. And it's freed me up to be able to go do things with friends and different things. And so, yeah, school's definitely been one of those mental investments that I've had to pump the brakes on.
And what happens whenever you put all of your time and thought into something, it can start out really small. Like to a lot of people, KU basketball, Jayhawk basketball might be a very small thing. And in essence, it is. But to me, it had become the biggest thing in the world. Like, they lose one game or something, the world comes crashing down on me. So my point is, what starts out as something small, maybe even in your eyes, but if you mentally invest hard enough, it becomes a god to you and holds so much power and control over you, because whatever happens with that event, those people, that team, then affects you, when in reality at the beginning it's such a small thing. So things grow and become big if you don't be careful of how much time you put into them. The article that we're going to be shaping the conversation around is from OmarItani.com. And the title of the article is Always Focus on What's Within Your Control. This article is from April 7th, 2020. I remember my dad, we were having a conversation about how much I worry about KU basketball. And he said, son, just worry about what you can control. While it's easy to say that, it's a different thing to do it. But it is true, because it's not worth worrying about things that you can't control. Like, for example, the weather is something too. You know that a lot of people stress about, worry about, talk about, especially in our area, farmers.
Yeah.
There's a lot of farmers around here that worry about, they need the right amount of rain to, bring in their crops and make their money, but they can't control the weather.
Yeah, and then there's a lot of other factors even going into how other people act or how other people respond to situations. There's so many. The only thing you can essentially control is, your immediate actions, your behaviors, your thought patterns and stuff. So it's extremely important to categorize, okay, what can I control? What can I not control? And then go from there and decide, okay, well, if I can get this assignment done now, I'm going to, or if I can go talk to this person about an issue, I will. But if there's things like the weather, like somebody's behavior or different things that you can't control, that's where a lot of times people will get that confused and think they can control those things or think that they can, have an influence on it, when really that's where a lot of the worry happens, is where people find themselves trying to control things they can't. And essentially when it comes down to it, there's not a lot that we can control, and that's where it requires faith.
That's
and
true.
Leaving that up to God to go, okay, I'm going to, all your external factors, I'm going to control. You have to trust me and let me take care of this. And that's where a lot of times people will blur the lines, is because they don't realize they can't control it, and that's where a lot of worry happens.
There are 4 quadrants in this article that have to do with always focus on what's within your control. There are 4 different quadrants that kind of fall under that statement, and we'll get into those here after this break. So quadrant number 1 is wasting your energy. When you focus on what is not within your control, you're wasting your energy on factors that will not move you forward. I found that happening with me a lot with my examples that I gave earlier, because I'm so focused on what doesn't matter. Therefore, what I cannot control. And I was at a men's conference, and this kind of has to do with the title of this article. Always focus on what's within your control. I was at a men's conference in Springfield, a Christian conference called Stronger Men's Conference in Springfield, Missouri. And one of the pastors said this, and the whole place was just like, it got kind of quiet, and then people like started cheering. Like it was really cool, a cool moment. He said, "Your problems are not the issue. Your focus is the issue."
That's good.
That is good.
Yeah.
Because I could have all the problems in the world, and we think, oh man, I'm so worried or so stressed. I'm in a bad place. I have all these problems. No, you have a focus problem.
Yeah.
You're focused on those problems. Where your focus should... So anyways, that was a really powerful thing that I heard this weekend. But Quadrant Run, Isabel, is wasting your energy. And that's a noticeable one in the body too.
Yeah, because I think that's, like I talked about before the break, like that is something people will tend to do, is waste their energy on stuff that they shouldn't be focused on or should not. So I think it's definitely one that can apply to a lot of people as far as going, okay, I need to shift my focus. I need to go somewhere else with it. So no, yeah, I think that's a good place for people to start.
Quadrant number 2, and we could spend more time on these, but they're pretty easy to understand, and I think you'll get the idea. So we'll go ahead and just kind of go through these. Quadrant number 2 is being paranoid. When you ignore, this took some time for me to process earlier, when you ignore what is not within your control, you are being paranoid. You shouldn't ignore external factors. Instead, accept what is and be aware of the external conditions and that are outside of your control, and then just move on. So that's worded a little bit weird for me, but basically tell us what it means.
Yeah, so essentially that means, so like what we talked about with external factors, like other people's behaviors, the weather, all kinds of stuff. With that, like you don't want to turn a blind eye to different things going on in the world around you, but at the same time, you want to be educated, you want to be aware of those things, because if you understand, from a factual standpoint what's going on, or from, okay, this is how they're acting, this is what's going on in this situation, then you can go, okay, I'm going to acknowledge this, but I'm not going to worry about it, because then you're right, that goes back to being paranoid, because then you get stuck fixating on the one issue, and then you never make any progress or move forward because you're just stuck. You don't know what to do. You're just like, I'm worried, and you keep fixating on the problem. You go round and round and round, and it just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, when in reality it might not be. So sometimes to step back, pull your emotions out of it, pull all those kind of feelings out of it, and look at it from a factual standpoint and go, okay, here's what's going on, and then take that approach will prevent a lot of the paranoia or a lot of the worry that comes along with fixating things you can't control.
Yeah, at this article it says we don't want to give the matter our undivided attention, but we do want to stay educated on it. And so that's a good example of, like, I know my counselor and I talked about a couple different times, like whenever you're in those high anxiety moments, you want to recognize it. You don't want to give it no attention, but if you start to give it your undivided attention, that's whenever it's kind of over, and you're kind of eaten alive by it in that moment.
Yeah.
So you just kind of want to acknowledge it and then just kind of let it pass, let it move on. We gave a couple strategies on that in my episode with Lauren. Some strategies of accepting anxiety and then watching it float away was the analogy we used. So yeah, quadrant 2, being paranoid, that's a good one. Quadrant number 3, wasting opportunities. I like this one a lot but there is some guilt that comes with this quadrant, because whenever you have those moments, and it will happen if you put in the effort to fix it, this moment will happen. The moment where you realize all of the time you had spent on this thing you mentally invested in was obsolete. I don't think I've used a word that big in a long time.
I was like, where did that vocab word come from?
I'm smarter than I thought. But anyways, there will come a moment where I remember breaking down in tears, like, I wasted all this time on something that does not matter in the slightest. It's not a godly thing, not necessarily a wrong thing, but I had made it one because that's all I thought about, all I put my time into. And you'll have that moment of guilt where you're like, what have I done? What have I been doing? What have I put all my money and time into and thoughts? What have I done? And it doesn't feel good, but it needs to happen. So my point of all this is, whenever you're thinking about all those things that do not matter in the slightest, you're wasting time that could be put towards something that actually matters and will benefit you as a person.
Yeah, and I think I know that feeling of that moment of realizing, oh, I've wasted my time focusing on this. And I don't even remember what it was now about necessarily, but you called me after we were hanging out and you left and you'd called me and you were like, I have been wasting my time on this. Like, why? And you were just like kind of beating yourself up. And I just remember thinking, no, this is an aha moment. Like, as much as that guilt and as much as that moment stunk in like that feeling, at the same time, it's like you should also feel good about that in the same sense of like you recognize you're out of that moment of going, oh, like you're not blind to the fact that you're worrying about things you can't control. You've recognized it. Yeah, you have that feeling of like, oh my goodness, what have I been doing? But it's a good thing because it's signaling it. You need to recognize it as a signal of going, okay, I've woken up. I know that I'm worrying about things I can't control. I'm now going to pivot, change my focus, change my investments, and I'm going to move forward and start making progress. Because that's the biggest thing is you don't want to guilt yourself too much into beating yourself up over it. But at the same time, it is a good thing in disguise because you're recognizing it.
I remember what was the most powerful to me, and not to get off on another conversation, but kind of to get off on another conversation in a way. I remember what was hitting me the hardest and just bringing those tears forth the most, and just the guilt, if you will, in a good way, was thinking this is kind of something you can picture in your head. So there's God and then there's me, and we're standing close together.
Mm-hmm.
And I had been putting all of this effort into something that does not necessarily glorify him. Not a bad thing, but I had kind of made it just my idol.
Mm-hmm.
And just me walking away from God, like for miles, just like my back is turned to him. I am focused on this.
Yeah.
And whenever I got to the end and I realized what I had been doing and I wanted to turn around and face God again, he was right there.
Yeah.
He was the same distance that he was before I started walking those miles away from him. And that is what made me just feel bad, was like, God, like, why? Like, why are you so nice? Basically, like,
yeah.
I had done all this in not honor of you. But when I turned around to come back to you, you're right there, ready.
And that's the beauty. That's the beauty of God's love, is no matter how far we think we've gone, I think that's a really good demonstration of like he's not going to leave you. The second that you're like, oh, what have I been doing? He's going to be right there to just catch you and be like, it's okay. Like, let's go. Let's move forward. Like, I forgive you for all of this. Like, that's the unexplainable grace and love and mercy of God that a lot of times our finite minds can't fathom. And so that's why, I mean, I felt that before. I'm like, I don't deserve this. I think that's half the time why I cry and worship all the time, is I'm like, I don't even deserve to be here. But I think that's also a beautiful example of the fear of God, because you know that we are so undeserving. And again, hard to comprehend in our minds as earthly. It's so hard for us to really, capture that beautiful essence of the Father. But at the same time, it's amazing because he's going to be right there. And that's where should be the biggest encouragement to you guys, is like, okay, I'm stuck. I'm at the bottom, especially if you're in that place right now. Like, God is like right next to you. Like, all you have to do is reach out and say, I need help.
Even if you're not a believer, and you're 100 miles from him and didn't even think him is real, when you turn around and think, I want to see if this guy's a thing.
Yeah.
When you turn around, he's right there.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. Like, you don't have to be a believer. He's ready to take you in.
Yeah, and it is so beautiful, because that's the biggest thing about God, is he loves us, and he loves us so much. I mean, that's the whole reason he sent his son in the first place to die for our sins, is because he knew, like, we're not robots. He didn't design us that way. He gave us the free will of choice, but he doesn't care. He doesn't care what kind of filth you might have on the inside or the outside. He just wants your heart.
I hope you're enjoying this episode of You versus Mind. If you have questions or comments of any sort, please feel free to email me at jleake2015@gmail.com. That's JLEAKE2015@gmail.com. Thanks again for listening, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the episode. So quadrant number 4 is kind of ahead of the other 3. The other 3 kind of come to a point that is quadrant number 4. Because quadrant number 4 isn't a negative feeling. It's the positive one. That if you can get the other three down, this is what you'll feel. Quadrant number 4 is in a sunshine state of mind. When you focus on what is within your control, you're in the driver's seat. You're being intentional about your attitude and thoughts and how you spend your energy. This is where you are being emotionally mature and thinking rationally and clearly in a sunshine state of mind.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. They kind of all come together, and it goes back to having that trust in the Lord and also going, okay, I can control my attitudes and actions, letting the Holy Spirit guide you, and then going, all right, what in my day can I control? What can I not? I'm going to let the stuff that I can't control go, and I'm going to move forward in my day, happy, have this attitude. Again, not every day is going to be perfect. Not every day is going to be great. But you can, through the power of the Holy Spirit, have that peace, that control, feeling of control, but really it's letting the Lord have control over your life. And it's going to be this, it's right, it's a joyful sunshine state of mind.
The article gives 3 questions to ask yourself whenever you feel yourself drifting into those first 3 quadrants, thinking of things that you can't control, being paranoid. These are 3 questions you can ask yourself to draw yourself back into that sunshine state of mind where you're intentional and in control with your thoughts. Question number 1 is, what is worrying me? Again, this is all about just stepping back and eyeing down your beast that you've been thinking about. Number 2 is, what is within my control? Number 3, what matters most to me and what can I do about it? Those first 2 are pretty simple and straightforward. What is worrying me? What is within my control? We can probably answer those questions. But number 3 is really important, because what matters most to me and what can I do about it? Because even if we stop thinking so hard about whatever it is, and we are in control when we think about that, we don't think about that as much, you still have to turn to something for the better.
Yeah.
Because even if you just solve your problem and don't turn any other direction, you're not getting anywhere. You still have to turn and focus on the things that are intentional.
Yeah.
And that will move you forward.
Yeah, there's a there's a quote that says you're most likely going to be a combination of the 5 people you hang out with the most. And I think that's also true for mental investments. Like, the 5 things that you're pouring yourself into the most, whatever that looks like, is going to be what comes back and what is reflected in your behaviors,
man, that is
your
good.
thoughts, your actions. So like, if you are investing in social media a ton and you're seeing stuff on there, that's going to come out of you at some point. If that's a huge part of your day. Now, if you're just regularly checking it, that's not going to rub off on you as much. The music that you're listening to, the movies that you're watching, all of that content that
Very
you
true.
see, like whatever that's going into your eyes is eventually going to get to your heart, which is eventually going to come back out into your actions. And so that's where the real question of, okay, what are those 5 things? And one of those should be your relationship with the Lord. Like, you should have that internal investment, and that should be the biggest of the 5, because that's going to bleed into everything else and create just a very outpouring. Everything's going to be spirit led. Everything is going to be just this wholeness of having Christ dwell in all 4 of these other areas. And so that's where you should have your major investment be. Now, what those other 4 look like, that's going to differ depending on, we all have different personalities, different interests, different things. And again, not all of those things, might necessarily be spiritually related, but they should be affected by your spiritual investment. And then they can be like work, family, friends, however that looks like for you, however your life is right now in the stage that you're in. But that's where it's so important, is to know, like, if you can get your spiritual investment lined up, then the rest of it is going to flow out of being filled up with the Holy Spirit.
I never would have thought about what you said too. Everything is a mental investment if you think about it.
Yeah.
At the beginning I used the examples of like the things I obsess over. But even some of the things that you don't obsess over, you just kind of do repeatedly, which I guess you could define as an obsession, but maybe things we wouldn't maybe define as an obsession. That's still a mental investment, and you still have to be careful of how it's affecting you. I like what you said, how the 5 people we hang around will define who we are, or the mental investments we make will define who we are. Tim Timberlake is a pastor from, I think, Jacksonville, Florida. He was at this men's conference, and he said, "We are born looking like our parents, but we die looking like our decisions."
Yeah, that's really good. Wow. Yeah, that is good. I mean, it's
I
so
wish I
true,
could take
though.
credit for
Yeah.
that. But no,
It's
he's amazing.
it's very
But
powerful. Because that's the other thing is we are essentially like, and don't look at it as like, oh my gosh, like I have to be so careful about what I invest in. Because a lot of times, and like with those first two questions, stepping back and analyzing, a lot of times, putting a name to the face will help you recognize if there's an issue or if there's a problem or if things are going good. But the other thing is just remember, like, don't be so uptight and being going, I have to get everything perfect. I have to get everything right. Just know that,
then that's a whole nother
yeah,
trail of nothingness.
we live in a world where there is going to be, we live in a world that is broken and evil. And so there's going to be always something that we struggle with. And there's always going to be, the enemy's always going to be trying to derail us, essentially. But if you can go, okay, I am the gatekeeper of my mind and my heart and my home, I can at least control here. I can at least control what I see in, those regards of different things and putting boundaries in place. That goes a long way to then going, if you see something out in the world or, hear something or, you're exposed to something that might not seem right. First off, if you're investing in the Holy Spirit, that's going to wake up and be like, hey, something's not right here. But you also are putting up those barriers to know that what's going into your mind and what you're investing in is being managed well by you because you're being thoughtful of it, you're being intentional of it. And I think those two things can really go a long way to help prevent, making bad mental investments in a way.
And I think it's so easy to overlook those things too because they're so common, unfortunately. The things that you were saying, like the 5 friends to hang out with, the music you listen to, the things that you watch are so overlooked by people because so many people do them, so then they think it's right. Society pushes it, so they think it's okay. Whereas that's not where we need to be judging what we do and what is right and what is wrong off of. That's the last thing you want to base things off of is society, especially today. But we've definitely thrown a lot at you today, I feel like, but in a good way. Just try to break it down, re-listen to this the best that you can. But a couple things to just kind of remind yourself of or to summarize. Your problems are not the problem. Your focus is the problem.
Yep.
That's a good one that I take from this. And then the article wraps itself up by saying, you can live in an external sunshine state of mind as long as you consciously practice the art of focusing on what's within your control and then doing something about it. Once you learn to accept what is and then focus on what you can control, you win. So try to learn how, even though it's so hard, just focus on the things that you can control. And notice it says focus on what you can control, not worry about what you can control. Just because you can control it doesn't make worrying valid. While some of that will come with it, while some stress and worry will come with it because you care so much, that's okay. I think that's kind of what motivates people, and that's what gets them out of bed is a little bit of noticeability and hey, man, I'm kind of worried about this. I care a lot about it. But again, you got to keep that inside of a box too.
Yeah, because again, you can't, the things you can't control, you got to give up to God. And even in situations where you are in control, essentially you need to go, okay, I can't do this without you, Lord, and let the Holy Spirit guide you and realize that, those external factors are going to come and go. But while we might not have control over it, the God of the universe has control over it. And so that should give us a lot of comfort. And because one thing is, trusting is hard, but when we leave it in the hands of the one who has control, then that's when we're truly set free. So I think that article wraps it up really nicely because we do need to focus on our behavior, our actions, our mindset, what we are investing in, and then let God lead us in the rest.
Yeah, just don't waste your time worrying about things that don't matter.
Yeah.
Widen your scope. Think, okay, is this life or death? Do I actually need to care about this?
Will it matter in 2 weeks, 2 years?
Exactly. So just try to give yourself those perspective questions. That's what I like to do. So I thank you guys for listening. I hope you pulled something from today's conversation and can go forward in a better state of mind. Have a good rest of your day, and God bless. Thank you for joining me for this edition of You versus Mine. My hope is that you are now more prepared to take on your mind when it attacks than you were at the beginning of the podcast. Podcasts on this show are weekly, so be sure and tune in next week for additional weapons to add to your mental arsenal. You can find You vs. Mind on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. I would love to talk to you and answer any questions you may have, or just have a conversation. Again, you can reach out to me at jleak2015@gmail.com. That's JLEAKE 2015 at gmail.com. Thank you again for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, and God bless.